Hello everybody. Today we are going to prepare your Mautic 7 for REST API access, and afterwards we're going to test out how it works. Okay, so let's go. In order to start with your REST API, with your integration with Mautic, you should have a couple of things in place. Let's check out what we need. Best practice, or ideally for security reasons, for tracking reasons, would be to create a new user that you specifically use for the API, and there you can assign a specific role which the API just needs to use, the permissions that the API needs to use. So create a user first. Next thing is to go to the configuration here, and inside the configuration the very first option that we have here is the API settings. Let's keep it simple for now in a development environment, and we just enable our API and enable basic auth. So here, this is basically all you need to do. Click on save here, and then we are ready to go likely. Why likely? Because you still need to test around and see whether it works out, because it's a bit tricky to install or get everything working properly. It's mostly server related, not Mautic related, so mostly check into your server configuration. What you can do now, and that only works from Mautic 7 onwards, is you can use the Mautic API version 2. So what I do here is I duplicate my tab, and then instead of my dashboard, I would then enter API version 2 or v2, and then I will arrive on this page here, and this page is automatically being generated. So from the code, there is documentation in the code, and this documentation generates exactly this one here automatically. So this is really cool because you've got a lot of details around like how you can use it and what are your endpoints, what your opportunities are here on how to integrate something. Additionally, what you can still do, but it rather pertains to the version 1 sort of API. Here we've got the old API, which you can still access via the dev docs here, the official ones, and then you can see the endpoints. Many things are fairly similar, so you can port principles and ideas, but we would be focusing on the version 2 API from now on and see what we can do with this. So the first thing that we probably want to do is I want to add context or retrieve context, because that's fairly simple, and most likely you're working with context when you're working in Mautic, so therefore this is a standard or very common use case. So how does this work? We want to do a GET request, and how do we do a GET request? What does that mean? Usually you would have another software for testing here, so you can use and jump into n@n right away. We'll do this in further videos, or you would start testing with integration, a REST API software. So here, this is exactly this. It's called Postman. There are many out there, so I'm not particularly attached to Postman. You can use any, and then go ahead and try this out. So let's try to build this together. I have installed a relatively fresh Mautic instance here, which is the Mautic 7 release candidate 2. And after this one, so now I put my GET request, as you can remember from the documentation. Behind this, I need to add the details of the endpoint. So I can simply copy this one because this is my endpoint now. So I want to retrieve this. And if I do this now, nothing should be happening because I'm not authorized. And why am I not authorized? Because I did not add my credentials here, because the my header expects me to add the credentials for authenticating against my API here. So that's what we're going to do next. Remember, we've created already this one additional user, and I'm going to use this one now for using the basic authentication. So therefore, I'm going to come over here, and then I can now switch on the basic auth. And this is what we just switched on in Mautic in our admin area. So this one doesn't really work here because it's a different user, and I've prepared this one here. So adding the username and the password. And now I click on send again. And I was hoping exactly for this one. So as you can see, via the version 2 API with the correct credentials, without anything else, parameters or logic or whatever, I get my data from here. Let's compare whether this is really correct. So I go back into my Mautic, check my contacts, and as you can see, it's really true. There's one contact, it's a demo data, dummy data here, and I can retrieve exactly this via the API. So this API, if you're already familiar with the version 1 API, you can see that's a bit more uncluttered here. You can see we've got the contacts, which is the ID of the collection basically, the total items, there's the meta information, and then you've got all the members. So this is basically a list of all the contacts that you retrieve here, and that's a list with one item, and you can see first name, last name, email, exactly like over there, 0 points, and everything else is empty because it's just like dummy data that are just entered. So, and we will now in further videos play around with different kinds of authentication and different endpoints and what you can do with all this now. But as you can see, here it's working. So I've got my Mautic on the one hand. On the other hand, I've got some client which can retrieve data, work with data from Mautic via Mautic's API. Why does it sometimes make sense to use Postman, Insomnia, or any other like REST testing framework? Because here, if you're using N8N or something right away together with Mautic, maybe there's a problem with the connection between those two, or there's some other problem. So here, usually on the Insomnia Postman side of things, you will have very, very few problems. So you would just trigger this one or dispatch this request here, and then all the problems will become visible when working towards your Mautic API. As I said before, look into the server configuration, redirect, stuff like this, maybe logging, maybe like a proxy server. There are really so many different things that could go wrong here on the server side of things, on permissions, on installation, and so on. All not really Mautic related, because this is a standard, fairly simple Mautic installation. I didn't do much. I didn't change anything. Very important, the server needs to be correct. Then your API should usually work smoothly. Okay, that's already it for today. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Bye.